CATP Oswal. This online discussion is put together by the International Tax Committee of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. And I personally thank the past president and chairman of the International Tax Committee, Dr. Mayur Naik, its conveners, Ritvik, Rajesh Shah, and particularly Siddharth, who's coordinating this particular event. It is only because of their efforts that we have been able to get this expert chat today. I'm also told that many of our NRI friends also have been invited to this chat. So I also welcome all of the NRI friends besides our normal members. Well, we are in the second phase of our lockdown, and I'm sure all of us by now have got used to this new normal. Staying at home is the best option available with us today. I also hope that all of us are making the best use of the time that we have, whether it will be work from home or upgrading or sharpening our skills, learning new skills, reading, exercising. Some of us are cooking, and even medication. Friends, since there is a restriction on the physical movement, but yet the BCA activities are in full flow. As I mentioned last time, the BCA journal, the soft copy of the BCA journal was released 2 days beforehand. Friends, I would just request all of you all, who are not members, to become members of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, and all those people who are members but have not renewed, to renew your membership. Also, friends, on social media, we have come out with a short survey which will take you less than 3 minutes to fill that survey. So please, I would request all of you to fill that survey. It's on the financial impact due to this lockdown that will happen on the CFM. As was mentioned earlier, this is the second expert chat from the International Tax Committee. Last week, we had the first being on the equalization levy, where we had a maximum full house capacity of about 500 people, and there were a lot of people who could not join in, and they were in the wait list. So this year we have made, obtained precautions, and we are, made sure that all those people after crossing 500 limit will be able to view this on the YouTube channel. Friends, the Finance Act was passed by the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha in the end of March, and the presidential assent also was received on 27. And this particular Finance Act has brought about a lot of changes, more importantly with the residential status, and these changes come in effect from 1st April 2020. Still, included those individuals who visited India for less than 182 days during a financial year. But this budget 2020 proposed to reduce this period to 120 for all NRIs. However, an amendment at the time of passing of the budget provided that the reduced period of 120 shall apply only in cases where the total Indian income for such individuals during the financial year is more than 15 lakhs. Others would continue to remain NRI if they stay does not exceed 181 days, as the case earlier, as that was the case earlier. Well, besides monitoring the number of days present in India now, NRI will also have to keep tab on his total income. This is just one such change that Section 6 proposes, but there are other provisions relating to stateless Indian citizen, status of person not ordinary resident in India, and other such matters. And there is going to be a lot of practical difficulties and issues facing with complying with this particular provision. To decode all these changes and analyze the impact of these changes, and to show as to what is the way forward, we have our experts today, and I welcome them once again and thank you to both of them to have agreed to join us today. With these words, I again welcome all our members, NRI friends, and even non-members who are attending this virtual meeting. And with these words, I hand over the proceedings to Mayur Bhai to take it forward from here. Thank you very
much. Thank you, Manish. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning from different time zones on these important sessions on discussion on the residential status of individuals. Friends, we have a distinguished experts to talk and discuss on the issues pertaining to changes by the Finance Act 2020 on residential status of individuals, especially visiting NRIs to India. As President Manish Sampath informed us, the basic changes which are made in the Finance Act, which has a far-reaching impact, non-residents who are visiting to India, the period of their stay without losing their non-resident status is curtailed to 120 days from 182 days in certain situations. Not only that, a deeming residence status category is created whereby their in foreign source income, if it is received or from the business controlled in or profession set up in India, could be brought to tax in India because they would be considered as resident but not ordinarily resident. There are a host of issues which may arise because of these changes, and there are a lot of questions in the mind of non-resident Indians, in the minds of various professionals. To deal with this subject in depth, the society thought it fit to invite two experts. We have Mr. Rajat Bansal, an IRS officer, who is going to enlighten us on this important subject. Of course, his views would be his personal views. And we have CATP Ostwal, again, an eminent person, chartered accountant, and a member of the International Tax Committee, who will take us through this session. So, before taking much of your time, may I request Mr. Oswal to take this proceeding further. Thank you very much to all of you for joining in large numbers. We apologize to those who could not join directly, but you may join our YouTube relay simultaneously and also later on the recorded session. Thank you very much. Over to Mr. Oswal.
Thank you, Mohit.
Just
Siddharth,
before Mr. Oswal begins, we are trying to give a live link on YouTube, but it may take some time. So for those who may not be able to join right now, we'll send the recorded video. In the meantime, when the link is up, the information will be given on the chat room. Sir, you may start.
What about Mr. Rajat Bansal? I am not seeing him.
He's already there.
He's there.
Yeah.
I'm very good there.
All right.
Can you hear me?
I can hear. I can hear.
Yes.
Now I can hear. Because I was because it was not seen. That is the reason why anxiety increased. Well, friends, this is the session Chartered Accountant Society has thought of creating for the purpose of understanding the provisions of residential status under the Income Tax Act. So far, for last 70 years, we have been knowing this particular section, Section 6, and it was amended only once in 1976, where the dwelling house was required as one of the conditions was deleted. Otherwise, it was smooth sailing section without any difficulties. But all of a sudden, the 182 days condition, which appeared in our this section 6, had the echo from OECD as well as UN model. Both talks about 182 days as a residential status condition. Number of countries have got 182 days presence as a condition, except very few countries, very few countries where the conditions are a bit different. Particularly if you talk about the USA, they don't bother about residential status, but they talk the citizenship, and therefore their taxation is citizenship basis taxation. So now I wonder whether India is also wanting to go for the citizenship, because we have indirectly brought in the concept of citizen of India, having an income, not having an income, having stayed, not having stayed beyond and less than beyond those number of days. So therefore, Section 6 has been amended, and that Section 6, which was originally proposed to be amended as per the finance bill, is different than the provision which has finally come up in the Act. Finally, the law came up somewhere last day, 23rd, 24th of March. No gossip, no discussion, no knowledge about this discussion going on, happening. Parliament approved the law within 27 minutes, and next day, President, 2 days after, President signed the bill. Unfortunately for us, we are habitually having an Income Tax Act published by either of the publishers on our table. But right now we are displaced. We are neither in our office, nor we have the Income Tax Act, neither in a full-fledged digital form, nor full-fledged book with us, the 2020 version. but therefore we have compiled the whole provisions in such a manner that it becomes very handy for us for the purpose of debate. So we will take you through old income tax section 6, new section 6 amendment, and number of issues arising on account of this new section 6 which have come up. Some of the issues may be related to the old law as well, which has an implication, but a lot of curiosity is there, and therefore it is essential to bring in those issues as well. And we have an expert on the subject who has been in the foreign tax division almost for 16 years, 4 years as an under secretary or deputy secretary, and thereafter as a joint secretary 12 years, 6 years or 12 years as the case may be. He will possibly clarify. And then he has been a member of United Nations Transfer Pricing Committee. He has been a member of the tax committee of the United Nations, and he has signed number of tax treaties with the whole of the developing world, particularly the Middle East, and therefore he is an expert on this subject as far as Middle East is concerned, and therefore a lot of anxiety people have. We have brought in Mr. Rajat Bansal, who will be answering. I will try to explain the provisions summarily, and then I'll put a question to him so that he can clarify the issues which people want to understand and want to know the implication of that. As you know, Section 6 of the Income Tax Act deals with the definition of residence. The Section 6 is important. The definition of Section 6 is important because Section 5 taxes the resident's income, worldwide income in India. Section 5.1, Section 5.2 talks of non-residents Indian income taxable, excepting a business control from India. That is again added as far as not ordinary residents are concerned. These are the provisions which have been time immemorial from my days when I studied my graduation since 70s. It is there continuing in the Income Tax Act. Now, we have understood very clearly that if a person is in India for more than 182 days, then he is a resident. Secondly, if he is going out of India for the first time for the purpose of employment, then he is also entitled to be in India for 182 days. A non-resident coming to India, of course, there are some condition nitty-gritties, I'll come to that. A non-resident coming to India, if he is in India for 60 days or more, and he is in India for 365 days in the preceding 4 years, then he becomes a resident. Then, if a person becomes a resident, then he has a transitory provision of 2 years that he can become not ordinary resident for next 2 years. But suppose a person has not been in India at all, he has been non-resident for 9 years out of 10 years. Then if he comes to India, he has been given, Government of India is very liberal, giving 2 years leeway for him to arrange his affairs. So that transitory phase has been granted to him. So therefore, in that 2 years period, he becomes not ordinary resident. So that provision has been added. And there the provision is, if he is a non-resident for 9 years out of 10 years, then he is not ordinary resident. Or if he is in India for 729 days out of 7 preceding previous years, then also he becomes not ordinary resident for next 2 years. In both the situation, for 2 years, this was hitherto the position. Now the Government of India changed the position, and now what is the change? The change is coming here. The change is, first provision continues to be as it is. Section 6.1 continues. The residential status of an individual, if he is, if he is in India for 365 days in the, if he is in India for more than 182 days, he becomes a resident. Second condition, if he is a citizen of India, if he is in 365 days in the preceding 4 years and is in India for 60 days, then he becomes a resident of India. Now, to this exception is, instead of 60 days, a person was allowed to stay in India up to 182 days in case of a person who is a citizen of India or a person of Indian origin, or a person who is going out of the country for the purpose of employment. He was allowed to stay in India for 182 days. And if you are abroad and coming to India for a visit, then you are also allowed to stay up to 182 days. What has been changed? The change has been now, if you are a citizen of India and a person of Indian origin within the meaning of the explanation under section 115C, and who is being an outside India comes to India on visit in a previous year, under the provisions of subsection C, he shall be allowed to stay instead of 60 days, 120 days. And 120 days in the case of a citizen or a person of Indian origin having total income other than income from foreign source exceeding 15 lakhs of rupees during the previous year, or for a period of 60 days, 182 days. The answer is 100. In other, if you have got an income more than 100 and less than 15 lakhs of rupees, your stay in India is up to 182 days. And if your income is exceeding 15 lakhs of rupees, your stay in India is restricted to 120 days, less than 120 days. This is a second condition. But if you are going out of the country, for an employment purposes, then your stay in India is allowed instead of 60 days, again, it is allowed to be 182 days. Next slide. Here there are some few questions which needs to be clarified, and therefore we have the best expert who can help us to understand the provisions of the changes which have been made. Rajat ji, my question to you will be, what was the need to bring these changes in the residency rule? Can you explain this to the audience? Mayur, Siddharth.
I believe Rajat ji is out. I'll just check on him. Meanwhile, you can just continue and I'll see Mr. Rajat.
Okay. So now let me continue, because these are, in fact, I had few questions here. Possibly, I thought that we should know from him what was the purpose of this amendment. Is there any statistics available with the government of India on the misuse or abuse of these provisions by the people? And if so, is it, if the abuse of the people has taken place by 10 or 20 people or 50 people, is it worthwhile changing the law for the whole nation and creating the problem? So therefore, government has not given any statistics, any figures, no consultation with the people, and all of a sudden, if some amendments of this nature is brought about, I think we need to understand. Yes, please.
I just unmuted you. I have unmuted.
Okay.
Rajat ji is there.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Siddharth?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
We can hear you,
Yes,
sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, good evening to all the members of the Bombay Chartered Accountant Society who are on this meeting, and very good afternoon to all other persons who have joined today's session. A very warm welcome to you all in trying times of COVID-19, and I think it's the best utilization of this time to have such knowledge enhancing sessions. Yes, being involved with the foreign taxation, I have been dealing with Section 6 for quite some time. I recall days when I was Foreign Tax Division in 1996, and the Rafiq ruling had just come in, and then later the Pereira ruling came in, and thereafter several events relating to residence happened. For instance, Azadi Bachao Andolan also had a reference to residence, and the circular 789 by CBDT was in question. So a lot of things have been happening in residence, and now this year this Section 6 related changes have been made, which Mr. Oswal has just summarized, and there are a number of questions or number of aspects in relation to Section 6 which people are curious to know, and we both of us, I and Mr. Oswal, will try our best to clarify whatever we can, because these issues are such that maybe answer to every question may not be available with anyone. And as Mr. Mayur initially said, these are my views in personal capacity, though I belong to the government. And please do not take my views as a statement by the government authority or by the government. So Mr. Oswal's point, what was the need for this change this year? So since it has been done by the tax policy division in the Central Board of Taxes, I am not privy to the exact reasons why this has come about. But initially, the finance bill had introduced a provision to deal with the taxation of Indian citizens who are stateless. So that was the initial provision which was introduced. And thereafter, I believe there were a number of queries, number of representations, and a press release was issued by Central Board of Direct Taxes. And finally, what we have in Act is much different, and actually it is not onerous also to that extent as were appending in the beginning, and the provisions now are quite different, and Mr. Oswal has already explained them. The main change is the provision of section 1A added section 6, which is making a citizen of India who is not resident in any other country being liable to tax therein because of criteria such as domicile or residence or any other similar criteria. Then if he has more than 15 lakh of rupees of income other than foreign source income, then he is deemed to be a resident in India. That is the main purpose. And was there any statistical analysis carried out for this? That I'm not aware of. But I guess that the issue of stateless income not being taxed anywhere was somewhere in the background for this. And therefore, this provision in respect of citizens of a country, that's our country, India, has been introduced.
Okay. So as far as statistics are concerned, your view is that there are no statistics. But yes, nevertheless, the policy division has brought in these changes. And because of that, these changes have been brought. But do you have any country's experience having seen that the income is the basis of taxation, determination of residential status? Is it a case of a discrimination between the two type of taxpayers? One is based on income, and second, based on income you become resident and amount of income. So therefore, there are two brothers or husband or wife. You take a case. Husband's income is more than 15 lakhs. He becomes resident, and both are non-resident. And the wife's income is less than 15 lakhs. She still continues to be non-resident. How does it operate, actually speaking? Is it not a case of discrimination?
Oswalji, if you are talking about discrimination in the technical sense, that
Yes.
is the article in the tax treaties relating to discrimination or barring discrimination, then I think that would not get invoked, because that discrimination would first require certain parameters to be satisfied. So let us not talk discrimination in that sense.
I am not talking
discrimination
under the treaty. I am not talking discrimination under the treaty. I am saying generally under the Indian Constitution, can you discriminate two taxpayers on a reasonable basis?
You can, because even the OECD in Article 4 clearly in the commentary states that countries can deem anyone resident under their domestic law. And I mean, this is a recognized aspect that countries have been having different kind of criteria for making a person resident. Those are not uniform. Now, your point is whether income itself of a threshold means makes him a resident. Now, you would see the finance bill was attempting to deem residence only on the basis of a statelessness of a person, not on the basis of income. So in a way, it is kind of relaxation or less onerous provision that a threshold has been kept. So I would say that residence is not on the basis of income. It is on the basis of statelessness. And the income is only a threshold to consider people having income above than that in India to be residents.
No, say for example, under Article 14 of the Constitution, you can discriminate based on certain class. Now here the income is the basis of a distinction between the two type of taxpayers, and therefore that was my question. But we will not dwell upon this much in detail. Time and memory will tell us whether this is permitted or not. But the next issue which I would like possibly to ask you the question is that what is that government has achieved by amending this section? On one hand, you are saying you are a deemed resident. On the other hand, you are saying you will be not ordinary resident. Your world income will not be taxable. And therefore, what you just now explained is correct. Earlier, while amending the provision, originally you thought of one particular basis, whereas you changed it to income criteria. So therefore now, how and later on, once the amendment was made originally, the income tax department brought in a clarification saying that genuine workers employed in the Middle East will not be subject to, will not be impacted by the change, and therefore the government gave a liberal welcome to the UAE residents, and they will not be subject, because government realized that we will be displeasing a lot of Indians who are staying abroad, and that would not be a good idea to do that, and we change the law. Now the question is, what is that we are achieving out of this? Siddharth?
Ultimately, all are you see?
Yeah.
Let us see what is the overall impact of these amendments in nutshell. In nutshell, the impact of these amendments is twofold. Firstly, if a stateless person is Indian citizens who is not a resident of any other country is having more than 15 lakh rupees of income, Indian income, then he is firstly deemed to be a resident. Now, under 6(6), simultaneously, he is also deemed to be a not ordinarily resident for all times whenever he fulfills the criteria under 6(1)(a). So he's going to be a not ordinarily resident. So that means his foreign income is never going to be taxed in India. Only the income which is derived from a business or profession controlled in India and is accruing outside India becomes taxable. So if you look at the impact of these amendments, it is confined to this much only, ultimate amendments that were done.
So, once a person becomes a resident under the Income Tax Act because he has come and he has stayed beyond a particular number of days threshold, we have subsection 6 of section 6, which gives him some relief. And that person, subsection 6 of section 6 says a person said to be not ordinary resident in India in any previous year, if such person is an individual who has been non-resident in India 9 out of the 10 preceding previous years and has been in the 7 preceding previous year for 729 days. This was an original condition. Subsection B was deleted. Subsection C is a newly inserted subsection which says a citizen of India or a person of Indian origin. Now, question is very interesting. A citizen, this talks of only for a citizen of India. If you are a not citizen of India, then this section does not apply. It means for foreigners, this section does not apply. A citizen of India or a person of Indian origin having total income other than income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakhs rupees during the previous year, as referred to in clause B of the explanation which I read it earlier, has been in India for a period amounting to 182 days or more, but less than 120 days or more, but less than 182 days. So therefore, this is newly inserted provision. So if you are a citizen of India or if you are a person of Indian origin and you have an Indian income, let's assume Indian income other than a foreign income, more than 15 lakhs of rupees, that income anyway, if you're a resident, not ordinary resident or non-resident, anyway it was taxable. But now they say 15 lakhs of rupees your income, you can come and stay in India up to for a period more, sorry, your income is less than 15 lakhs of rupees, you can come and stay for less than 120 days. But if your income is exceeding 15 lakhs of rupees, you can come and stay up to 182 days. That is exceeding 120 days, but less than 182 days. So this has been a newly inserted section. And thirdly, last clause which has been added, a person who is a citizen of India, who is deemed to be the resident in India under subclause 1A will also be deemed to be, he is a permanently not ordinary resident. So this has been newly inserted explanation, which section which has been added. Now here an explanation has been added which says, for the purpose of this section, expression income from foreign source means income which accrues and arises outside India, except where the income is derived from a business controlled in or profession set up in India. We'll come to this explanation little later. Before that, we go to the deemed residence station, deemed residence, section 6(1)(a). Now, section 6(1)(a) is a newly added section. Go to section 6(a).
1A.
1A. Yeah. What it says, notwithstanding anything contained in clause 1, an individual being a citizen of India having total income other than income from foreign sources. Now here it talks of only citizen of India, person of Indian origin is not covered. So therefore, overseas citizen of India is also not covered here. Only a citizen of India having total income other than the income from foreign sources. So that will be my question to Rajat Bhai. Exceeding 15 lakhs of rupees during the previous year shall be deemed to be the resident in India in that previous year if he is not liable to tax in any country or a territory by reasons of his domicile, residence, or by any other criteria of similar nature. Now the issues are very interesting. Issues are arising. If you are a pure resident under section 6(1) by virtue of you are continuously staying in India for more than 182 days, then this deemed residency clause is not applicable to you. You are purely resident. But if you are a non-resident perpetually for long years, number of years, but now you are coming to India, you have earned income abroad, you invested monies in India, and you have earned income on that income on investment made by you in India by way of a dividend, interest, whatever may be the case, and that is exceeding 15 lakhs of rupees, then you are deemed to be the resident of India if the most important condition, if you are not liable to tax in any country or a territory by reasons of a domicile, residence, or any other criteria. Sir, now the most important question which is perplexed in the mind of people is, what do you mean by you are not liable to tax in any country or any territory by means of reasons of domicile, residence, or any other criteria? I see the language of this section is bodily lifted from Article 4 of the tax treaties, that is the residence definition under the tax treaties. So, sir, what is your opinion on person who is not liable to tax? Does it mean a person should be subjected to tax? He should physically pay tax in the other country, or should be there is a law in the other country which levies him a tax, but they don't levy any tax for the time being? Or there could be a situation where the country has no tax law at all, or there could be a situation you are in other country, you are normally taxable, but your incomes are exempted and therefore not liable to tax because of that. So what is your take on that, sir? Can you explain this provision to us little? We are novice students, so therefore we would like to understand the provisions from you.
Oswalji, the concept of liability to tax has been under discussion even in court decisions in India, several of them, and it's there in the OECD commentary on Article 4 also. So generally what liability to tax is understood to mean is that there is a charge of tax on the income under that country's law, and it need not be in respect of all kinds of income. Even if there is a charge of tax in respect of some of the items of income, that is the first stage. That is what liability to tax is. Now the next issue is whether he should actually pay tax. Now, actual payment of tax is not required. As you would see that in some of the court decisions in India, they have referred to Philip Baker. Philip Baker said that suppose somebody claims some expenses or some losses and does not pay any tax, whether it will make him a person not liable to tax. That would mean denying the treaty benefit to a large number of people, which would be senseless. So obviously, actual payment of tax is not a requirement for making anyone liable to tax. Second is whether exemption from tax, there is a charging section like in India, making a person liable to tax, but then in respect of certain income, let us say agricultural income or some income, there is an exemption provided under the tax law of that country. That will also qualify as being liable to tax. So liable to tax is quite wide in its meaning. About the exemption from tax, some of the countries believe that unless they don't consider the exemption to tax as a case of liability to tax. I can give you example of Chile. For example, Chile probably does not consider the liability to tax to include cases where there is an exemption from tax. If you OECD commentary, Chile has a reservation in respect of pension funds, but I had an actual experience of dealing with Chile people, and there they raised this point that exemption is not a case which they will consider to be liable to tax. And probably in India-France treaty, this is clarified that if, I do not remember exactly, but as far as I remember, in India-France treaty, there is a clarification that exemption to tax cases will be considered to be meaning coming within the liability to tax. There is some such thing in that treaty. So, I mean, this aspect is very clear that liability to tax is basically charging, being there a charge to tax. Now, this would take us to some of the cases where under the domestic law of some countries, I'm aware that under the domestic law of some countries, the definition that they do not regard a person as resident on the criteria of liability to tax, because there is no tax in those countries. So what will happen in those cases? So let me tell you that under section 6(1)(a), those cases will be covered by being not liable to tax, and those persons will be treated, those cases will be considered as stateless persons, or they will come within the purview of this clause in Indian domestic law, even if they are considered as resident in their own country.
So what you mean to say is possibly people from Middle East who are not paying taxes in those countries, there's no tax system, you are not filing your tax return, you are not paying even single rupee tax. They will be all stateless person despite the fact they have several years they have been staying in that country?
Yes, because you see, this is an issue which has been there, and as you know, on the under discussion in court decisions for very long, and there is a view that treaties are meant only to relieve double taxation, and if there is no tax in any country, then that actually there is no the section 90 is somewhat in contradictory to section 90, and the treaty lies there. But this view has not been given credence to, or has not been accepted fully, and we do have treaties at the moment where there is no liability to tax, and still, because they are considered to be residents under their domestic law, the treaty operates. And in fact, the UAE treaty is an example, Kuwait being other treaty, where the residence under the treaty itself is pegged to the number of days of stay in that country instead of making it linked to liability to tax. So your question, direct answer to your question is yes, where there is no liability to tax in respect of any kind of income in a particular country, those cases will be covered under Section 61A. And that, just to alleviate any doubts on this count, that the impact of these amendments we should always keep in mind, because foreign source income of such persons will still not be taxable in India, because these persons will be regarded as not ordinarily resident for all times, irrespective of the condition of 9 out of 10 assessment years or 29 days in preceding 7 years. Those conditions are not required to be fulfilled. The persons who are falling within the purview of Section 61A or under explanation 1B, or as it is amended and consequent its mirror image in Section 6.6, those persons will be regarded as not ordinarily resident. So this is what it is in a nutshell.
So therefore, what you are saying is you are assuring the people who are staying in Middle East that you have income less than 15 lakhs of rupees here. So therefore, you will have nothing to bother. If you have got an excess income, take away. Don't keep it in India. So, or keep the source investment in such a way that you don't earn an income beyond 15 lakhs of rupees. Is it that case?
No, we cannot say that. You see, I would not, it's a question of putting the horse before the cart or cart before the horse. I will not say that you earn less than 15 lakhs. That is not the point. The point is...
No, I was really crudely asking you this question. The reality is, indirectly, if we amend the law to make everybody liable to tax, it is no other choice than to people reduce their income below the threshold so that they don't come within the provisions of law, and they are comfortably come and stay in India up to 182 days. Otherwise, you are curtailing their ability to stay in India for less than 182 days, 120 days, and therefore people, that was the reason I put the question in a little very crude manner so that I get real answer. I can extract the answer from you. That was the idea. Well, sir, the next question possibly will be relevant here is because why do we, yes please, why do you need to get these provisions in the Income Tax Act when you already got the GAR provisions? Yes, hello, can you listen us? We have lost your voice, Siddharth.
Yeah, I'm just checking. I think he's
voice is lost.
We have got him through another line. He's there.
Sir, are you there on the line?
I believe we have some connectivity issue at his end, and we should have him in some time. Meanwhile, sir, you can continue with what Rajat sir said. Based on that, we can proceed ahead.
Yeah. Oswald, just one point here, if I may add. Liability to tax was discussed in the Azadi Bachao also, if you can make a reference to that.
No, he has already made that reference. We are going to discuss the case laws a little bit later. This point was only incidentally arose because this is explained. You can't just keep this issue hanging on a little later. So therefore, I thought that I must ask this question even now and later on also, both the times. That was the whole idea. So in fact, another issue, very important issue arises is subsection 5 of the section 6 of the Income Tax Act says, if a person is a resident in India in any previous year relevant to that assessment year in respect of any source of income, he shall be deemed to be the resident in India in the previous year relevant to that previous year assessment year in respect of each of his source of income, which could have a larger ramification. And therefore, one should remember that if you have got one source of income, which is for which you are considered to be a resident, then you will be resident for all the purposes. That is another section, subsection, which I thought that we should draw attention to. The next important issue arises in this particular section is that when a person is going abroad for the purpose of employment, what do you mean by for the purpose of employment? And secondly, it says, another issue in this section which needs to be understood, an explanation says, when for the purpose of this section, expression income from foreign source means income which accrues or arises to him outside India, except income derived from a business controlled in India or controlled in India. That is the one section which says. So question arises is, what do you mean by business controlled or profession set up in India? That is a larger question, and this has a big ramification. Particularly look at those professionals and look at those actors and actresses who are the self-employed, who work from India initially and later on who goes abroad and earns income there. They may be non-resident, but when in a particular year, if the income exceeds more than more than 15 lakhs of rupees, and they come here and they stay here for more than 120 days, then they become not ordinary resident. And if they are not ordinary resident, then their income in India becomes taxable. But there are other ramifications which arises. Therefore, their foreign income also could be liable to tax in this situation, because unless it is clarified, what do you mean by business controlled or profession set up in India? An actor or actress has set up his business of acting or profession of acting in India, and then by virtue of that, they are going abroad. Yes, please. Yes, come back. Sir.
Yes, please.
We have I only explained the provisions of law of subsection 5, and then the two issues which I raised for the purpose of asking clarification to you. And that question I'll repeat. One is that subsection 5 of the section 6, which says if you are a resident for one particular source of income, your income from all sources, you will be resident in India. So can you explain these provisions, how it operates?
So as I was saying, Oswalji, if a person is liable to tax in any other country for, let us say, this is often the case in Middle East, that generally on very few streams of income there is tax, but if there is tax on some stream of income, then he is liable to tax there. So similarly in India, I mean the section 6.5 which you are referring to may be in a different context, but I'm just using that to explain the position in respect of liability to tax. So if one is liable to tax in one respect of the provision in 6.5 is that if one is considered resident in respect of one source of income, then he will be considered resident in all sources of income. So I mean, then he is, for various provisions of the Income Tax Act, he will be regarded as a resident, and for the purposes of treaty also, he will be regarded as a resident.
Okay. Now the next question is, if suppose the explanation says, you go to the next slide, slide number 9, next slide. For the purpose of this section, the expression income from foreign source means income accruing or arising outside India, right? Now, except for the income derived from a business controlled in or profession set up in India. What does it mean? This term is not defined in any Income Tax Act. So what is the meaning of the term income derived from a business controlled or profession set up in India? Let me give an example. One of the very celebrity actor or actress will be more will create more interest in the participant. So therefore a celebrity actress, she is earning sizable income here. Like we have celebrity, I don't want to name a person, it will be unfair. So then she goes abroad, she stays abroad and she earns the income. Her activity is profession, a vocation, whatever may be. It is a profession only. Acting is a profession. So she earns an income from that. It will be her business. And she also goes abroad and earned an income. So therefore, will it be called as an income derived? Because she became very celebrity actress only by acting in various films in India. And therefore, she initially set up her profession in India. And then thereafter, she became very famous, was called upon to come and act in other countries. So therefore, she earns an income from there. And then in that case, will this example fit in this particular example? Or we have another case of celebrity lawyer who was very successful lawyer in India. and then now he has gone in UK and set up his offices there, and he is a proprietor. So therefore, he comes to India for litigating. He is also a member of the Bar Council of the UK, and he is also litigating there, and he is also giving an opinions there. So therefore, whether his income from sources, whether his profession will be considered to be set up in India, and therefore he becomes not ordinary resident by virtue of his stay exceeding 120 days, but less than 182 days, his world income becomes taxable as far as professional income is concerned?
Oswalji, I think in the second case at least, because the lawyer's practice is a profession set up in India, and now he is earning some income from outside India by virtue of that profession which is set up in India, this probably would get covered here. This would be falling within the purview of this clause.
Sir, you are challenging Harish Salve.
What does he say?
He is a non-resident in India. He is settled in UK. He has set up his practice in India, and he has earned income here. And now he is earning substantial income in UK because his practice is flourishing in UK. And therefore, he is non-resident. Now, therefore, if he comes to India for more than 121 days because of his some litigations require him to come and stay, but less than 182 days, so does you mean to say he becomes not ordinary resident, and therefore his world income, that business is set up in India, profession is set up in India, and that also will get taxed in India?
His world income will not get for tax.
No, not world income. Not, I am not talking of world income. Business income or professional income set up in India, because I am asking, he has set up India, and now he has extended that professional activity in UK.
Yes, so I mean, if the business is controlled from India or the profession is set up in India, and a linkage of that kind is there, the clause is meant for that. I'll not like to comment on Mr. Salve's case, but on the face of it, it appears that it is for these kind of situations.
Okay, so therefore he is not covered by these provisions. That is what we are trying to say. So that gives a lot of relief to the lawyers. And also, what about the actress? The example of actress in the same similar situation.
So you see, if it is a income controlled from business in India or a profession set up in India, if it is an income from a business controlled or profession set up in India, according to me, this will be caught under this clause, and that will be covered here in case of a not ordinary resident. That is what the idea is.
No, therefore, earlier the question was little safer, 182 days or more, but now the risk has been greater, because 120 days and 181 days, the leeway is narrowed down. Within that, if you are less than 120 days, you are a non-resident, but you are more than 120 days, but less than 181 days, and the criteria of income applies, and therefore you need to be caring for yourself and plan your affairs, otherwise you will be taxed on that income earned in India, income earned abroad as well. This is what the conclusion is coming to. Now the next question.
Limited category of incomes only, not all incomes earned abroad. Very limited category of income which have a connection
from a profession
or which
set
have
up,
a nexus with India.
Income from profession set up in India.
Yes.
Not unless the person can prove that what income, what profession I have set up in India is different than the profession which I have set up myself separately in UK and in other countries, then it is a totally different case.
Yes, then it is a different case. Yes.
Okay, now the question is, sir, if a person is going abroad for the first time for the purpose of employment, we say that you will be liable to tax, you will be allowed to stay in India for less than 182 days earlier provision. So you were allowed to stay less than 182 days, but that we have changed it. Now we say you can stay in India for less than 120 days. In other words, what do you mean by a person who is going abroad for the purpose of employment? Employment, does it mean that employment means employer-employeeship relationship should be there? Only the categories of people who are going abroad, who are purely working as an employee under the employer, are covered by this word for the purpose of employment. Rest of all, the exemption is not available.
Oswalji, firstly, I'd like to clarify that there is no change in clause A of explanation 1. So in respect of person going on employment, it will still be 182 days. But since you have raised a question on that, so this has been, as you know, a matter of court, a matter which is under controversy or which has been under dispute. And in a Kerala High Court, there is a decision by Kerala High Court where they have said that even it's not necessary that the person should be going only for employment. But you know, the language of the provision is very clear that he has to be going for employment. So according to me, my understanding, the provisions of law are plain, and it is only for the purpose of employment. In that situation, the time limit of 60 days will get extended to 182 days. Otherwise, it will remain 60 days only.
So the term employment is, the English is such a versatile language. It can have different meanings in the different context. And therefore, employment doesn't mean employer-employee relationship. I am employed by a company for doing audit of that company. If I say that, it means I am employed for the professional activity. So therefore, I am engaged, I am employed, which we say in a very normal language of the English. And therefore, employment is a term which is used not only for the purpose of getting remuneration as an employee, but also getting remuneration as a professional, getting remuneration as a vocational, or even a self-employed. A person who is working himself is also called as a self-employed in the English. And therefore, employment, should it not be given a wider meaning, as you rightly said, Kerala High Court has taken that particular meaning.
I think on this point, you definitely have a very a view which can be canvassed. But I'll tell you that according to my understanding, here the employment is used very clearly, and otherwise it would have been some other word in law which would have clearly indicated that a person going for any vocation, not only for employment, is covered. So I think we agree to disagree on this point.
So what you are saying is that the language would have been there, person who is going abroad.
The person who is going abroad for a vocation or for
why vocation? Then everything is covered. Person going abroad will be all covered. What you are trying to say is that?
No, I mean, let us not go straight away to that situation where person going abroad for any reason. This has been linked, there has been given a reason in the legislation for some purpose he's going. So now the purpose stated in the law is employment. The view taken by Kerala High Court is that this employment would extend to other vocations also. And the third situation is what you are saying, that he is going for any reason whatsoever. That will be that should be the meaning. But so I'll
no, I'm not saying that meaning. Situation. I'm not saying that meaning. I said from your explanation, I thought, is it that the law should have been like this? The word for the purpose of employment, you are saying, is used in a very narrow sense. Therefore, what you say that this is creating confusion. So if it is creating confusion, possibly the word would have been he has gone abroad, or alternatively he has gone abroad for if this word would have been, you said alternative word should have been used. What is the alternative to the employment word? I suppose that
it could be for any vocation. So that would include, I mean, a better suited word could have been there if one were to canvass that this is not only employment, but also self-employment or going for business, then maybe some other word could have been there.
Okay. Well, anyway, this is an interesting controversy. There are a number of decisions on the subject as well, which we will point it out little later, and then we will go ahead with this subject. The next slide is in relation to the scope of income, which I will not waste your time, everybody's time, because I'll just explain section 5 has two limbs. Subsection 1, which talks of the world income of the resident liable to tax, and second, subsection 6 says only the Indian income of the non-residents are taxable. In between, the resident has some second criteria, that is, which we have discussed 2 minutes before, not ordinary resident. He will be taxable in respect of any income from a business controlled or a profession set up in India also will be treated as taxable. Section 2 subsection 30 defines non-resident, means a person who is a resident, who is not a resident for the purpose of section 92, 93, that is transfer pricing provisions and that controlled companies regulation and section 168, that is the purpose of taxation of the as a representative assessee, and includes person who is not ordinary resident within the meaning of section 6 subsection 6. So therefore a not ordinary resident is defined to be a non-resident, and there are a number of other consequences which in the subsequent slides we will deal with, and we will explain those provisions little later. Next slide, we go to the provisions of, there are a number of nuances related to applicability of section 6, though some of them we have discussed earlier. Nuances we will not repeat, the remaining nuances we will discuss now. The test under section 6 is applicable for the financial year, that is from 1st April to 31st March, known as the previous year, while calculating the income. And therefore, intermittently going abroad, coming back, there is no continuity of stay abroad is not relevant. Going, coming is all put together. You have to add together and look at number of days stay in India. Now the issue arises is very interestingly, if suppose a man is going abroad for the work and then coming back, going abroad and coming back, question is the day of my leaving and day of my arrival in India, either of the days should be excluded, both the days should be considered as day of stay in India.
So Oswalji, as it is mentioned in this slide also, and the view taken by the Bangalore ITAT and Bombay ITAT in 2 cases, and I'm also aware of one more case of one Mr. R.K. Sharma, that the day of leaving should not be counted, and if he has left very late in the day, and they have relied on the General Clauses Act to say that this should not be a day when he could not have worked. So, or the day of arrival if he has arrived very late. So those days they have sought to exclude. On the other hand, I came across a decision of Authority for Advanced Ruling in 1995. In ruling number 7, they held that this should not, they gave a contrary view. They said that all that is stated in the legislation is days of presence in India. And if he is present in India for any hours, any number of hours, then it should be counted in. So this is an issue where there is no final view till now. And my suggestion to all the people who are affected by such provisions is to be better to err on the safer side. I mean, this situation would matter in some cases, and somebody may want to contest it on the basis of the favorable case court decisions. But in general, it may perhaps be better to take it conservatively and count it, because as far as I am aware, departmental officers, unless they are covered by the jurisdictional high court or jurisdictional tribunal decision, they may take a contrary view. So perhaps this on this issue, it is better to be take a conservative view.
Now, situation, I do agree with your views. One should take conservative view, but a situation like COVID has brought in the difficulties to the people. You people have stopped all the airlines going abroad. A person who has come abroad from abroad in India and he has booked his ticket to go abroad on say 26th May, so 26th of March. All of a sudden, the government of India stopped all airlines in the world over. The countries have stopped airline, and he is stranded here in India. Because of that, his number of days, 2 or 3 days short is taking place. What does it mean? Does it mean that he becomes a resident, or he gets some relief because of force majeure situation? He was compelled to stay in India. He had no other choice. He has no other option. He has no other way to go abroad. What do you in such situation take a view? Does it in such a situation, if you calculate number of days taking into account 1 day arrival or departure, either of the day, possibly he get a chance to call himself to be non-resident. Otherwise, he will become resident. So what is the view in that case to be taken?
So, Oswalji, now we have gone beyond the day of arrival and day of departure. We are not talking about a COVID pandemic situation where somebody is struck in a country, not out of choice, but out of compulsion. So, as probably you referred to, the OECD has issued some suggestions, and some countries have actually done this. I was reading that United Kingdom has allowed up to 60 days exemption from counting a person, for making a person as resident as again in exceptional circumstances. So they have done it through by making a change. So far there is no change here in India, and unless there is a change by the government on this, it would be I think it would operate as per the legislative provisions and as per the law as it stands today, that is 182 days will be taken to be the measure of residence. And now you are in this slide, you are referring to this, we are referring to this Suresh Nanda case, which is an exception to the existing legislation. And the court had held that because his passport was impounded by the government authorities for a wrong cause, it was unjustified completely. So under those circumstances, and all other facts of his case, they considered that for 20 years plus, he was always a non-resident. He wanted to go, he could not go because his passport was impounded. Therefore, they held in that particular case, Delhi High Court, that he is to be regarded as a non-resident. But they also made it clear in the decision itself that this is applicable only on facts and circumstances of that case. And it has, in other words, it does not have a general application. So, I mean, this is an exception to the, I am not aware of any other case of this kind, but this case is definitely there. So now for COVID situation, I would repeat myself that if there is consideration in the government, I am not aware of that because I am no longer in the ministry. But if there is consideration in the government on basis of OECD guidelines, and if there is any change explicitly made, expressly made, then that relief would be available. Till then, one should take it as 182 days criteria or whatever number of day criteria to be operating.
So, sir, what you are recommending is possibly you should litigate till Supreme Court or High Court and then get a relief instead of the.
No, I'm not. I'm not recommending that at all. All I'm saying is that it has. This is a matter governed by legislation, and unless there is a change in legislation through amendment or through a circular, it will be. It will not be.
I appreciate what you are saying. Therefore, government need to be proactive and realize the situation. People, you see, it should not become like the migrant workers wanted to go and 50,000 and 60,000 people gather out of Delhi in the Delhi bus station or Bombay. Yesterday we saw in Bombay also 30,000 people, migrants came to Bandra to go to their native places. And then we all of a sudden realized that this problem was created. Is it not a proactiveness of the government which should come in the way, come forward and explain the situation? Otherwise, you know, frankly, you rightly explain General Clauses Act. Literally, one should understand and explain the day of arrival and day of departure should be based on calculating exact number of hours he is. A day becomes completed on 24 hours in a day. Otherwise, literally, I am reminded of a example where, you know, I went to income tax department and he sends me an officer gives me a notice saying that you are given 1 day, you must come and explain this within 1 day. Within 1 day means what? He has given me a notice today, and the day of giving notice should be considered as the day of 1 day. Therefore, I must comply on the same day. It is not on the next day. Does it mean that? So therefore, if the same interpretation has to be applied here in the section 6, it has to be reasonably understood that the day on which notice has been given should be excluded, and next day I should comply with the provision. Otherwise, again, another very interesting example comes to my mind. Everybody has seen the Jolly LLB movie, and in that Jolly LLB, that judge sits on the dharna and he says, okay, I am giving you notice. The case is will be heard tomorrow. And he goes on the strike till 12 o'clock. and next day morning he says 12 o'clock is over. Next day is that now the time starts for giving the notice which was given to you yesterday. So you appear and tell us why this should not apply. So does it mean that? So therefore practical difficulties must be considered. And therefore this, what you are saying is absolutely true, that this requires government's consideration, and therefore Bombay Chartered Accountants Society like association must represent to the government and pointing it out seriousness of this issue. Do you agree with that?
No, I agree. And I mean, as I told you, the view I'm giving you is a dispassionate view. And I'm giving you the position. I mean, I could have said very easily that it should be this way, but that this is law, and law would operate the way it is. So anyway, let's move on to the next part.
Next slide. And thank you for clarifying that OECD view and also UK view. UK has come out with a clear cut. There are 4 or 5 countries which have come out with the guidelines.
Yes, Australia has come out.
Australia,
Ireland has.
Ireland, yeah, and they have all realized the consequences. Just because number of deaths in those countries are very high, they have not come out. They have realized the citizens' difficulties. And just because number of deaths in our country are very low, we should not think that let people die, we will then clarify the situation. I believe we should be very human oriented, and we must be on a humanitarian ground, consider these aspects. A number of Indians who have gone abroad and they have been stuck up, number of foreigners who have come in India and they got stuck up. And there are a number of ramifications of this particular situation. Just because a non-resident Indian has come who has no intention to stay here for a long and stuck up, and his businesses are abroad, and he is taking all the decisions of the business. So therefore, place of effective management, even for part of the year, situated in India, will make the business, a poem is situated in India, and therefore you will tax him. You have draconian provisions. We have a draconian implication of certain provisions which are not intended also. And therefore, we as a professionals, we do come across this situation much ahead of the revenue authorities. Revenue authorities, of course, come across this situation 2 years later when we file the tax return of the taxpayer, and then you deliberate the subject. And therefore, when we are telling you something like this, I think deliberation is required. And if required, a representation on this subject can be brought in and made to, and possibly person like you who is the chief commissioner can help us also recommending the government of India that the representation have some merit and therefore should be considered. Well,
no, I will convey. Yes, I will convey the concerns. Definitely, I will convey the concerns. Yes.
Thank you, sir. So, Siddharth, next, you want to, Siddharth, run these examples which you...
No. Oswalji, my suggestion is, because considering the time, let us move on to certain very important aspects which people might be wanting to know. Like, for example, I think we would like to cover the aspect that is about whether the income should be computed first or residence should be determined first. Those things let us cover first. If we have time, we can come back to this OECD thing.
Okay.
Sir,
Now
certainly, and also I would request, sir, if we can have a deliberation on the treaty positions where there is a residence under the treaty and the domestic law.
I'm coming to that for you. You are very, very aptly said. So therefore, we will come to that subject. Now the question is, we have deliberated the situation where for the purpose of employment, we have a number of decisions which are favorable to the taxpayer. We have seen the trend as far as advanced ruling authority is concerned. They take very, very conservative view and one-sided approach. And whereas tribunals and the high courts and the Supreme Court is exactly taking contrary view. And despite the fact that Supreme Court takes a contrary view, advanced ruling authority has the ability to overrule Supreme Court. And that is what in the case of Abdul Razak has taken place. After the Azadi Bachao decision also, they overruled the Supreme Court decision. We have nothing to say on the subject. We therefore, we go to next item here. Now, sir, the section 23, newly inserted. An individual who is a citizen of India having total income, the deemed residency, other than the foreign source exceeding 15 lakh, and if he is not liable to tax in any other country. So what you are saying is a stateless person or a territory. Territory is used because Hong Kong and Taiwan are not countries, they are territories. By reasons of his domicile, residency or any other criteria of a similar nature shall be deemed to be the resident in India. Take the case, how do you calculate his income or his residential status? Do you have to calculate first his residential status and then you have to determine how to tax the income? Or do you calculate the income first and then decide the residential status? It is a rigmarole. Here first you decide residential status based on the income and then calculate the income. How do you do that? Can you explain, sir?
Oswalji, that's a very interesting point. And according to me, this is a domestic law provision. Now we are saying that what we need to calculate is his total income, and we need to exclude the foreign source income and then see whether it exceeds 15 lakhs. And if that is so, then he will be deemed to, Indian citizen will be deemed to be a resident if he is a stateless person. These are three limbs of this change or the amendment. Now, I will say that for calculating total income, it will be as per the scheme of the Indian Income Tax Act, because the word total income has been used. So therefore, if any income is exempt under the Income Tax Act, which is not otherwise taxable in India, that gets excluded if it is exempt under the domestic law. To that extent, there is no confusion. Let me give example. Let me complete, Oswalji. Let me now tell you the situation when there will be a issue. Let us take an example of a person in a Middle East country, and he comes to India and participates in a horse race, or he wins a lottery here. Now, under the India-UAE treaty, other income is taxable only in the country of residence. So actually, till now, before this amendment, this income as per the treaty was not taxable in India and was taxable only in UAE. Now, for the purpose of applying this 15 lakh threshold, how will we go about it? So in my view, since the treaty would require a change in his residential, application of treaty would require first you decide which country he is a resident of. And the residence has to be decided under the respective domestic laws. So the benefit of treaty till that stage, in my view, would not be available. And this income, because it is taxable under the domestic law, will be included to compute the threshold of 15 lakh. And later, if it is decided which country he is resident of, if he becomes a resident in India under Section 61A, and he's also a resident of UAE, probably under their domestic law, then maybe a tiebreaker test, which we will be covering in a short while, then the benefit of treaty would arise. But at the threshold stage, because you have to have a scheme of things or a sequential process to operate this clause. I believe that there was some talk that maybe some more guidelines will be issued in respect of this. But as of now, I'm giving you my view, how it would operate. So this is my view, how it would be computed.
So therefore, if a person is a dual resident in one country and the other country both, then by tie-breaking test, it will be decided that which country's resident he is. Like, for example, where his permanent home is available, where his economic nexus or center of vital interest is there, where his habitual abode is there, or where which country's citizen of his he is. Now, therefore, let's assume that the tie-breaking test under the treaty is applicable, and by virtue of that, a person becomes a resident of the foreign country. And if he is a resident of the foreign country, then domestic law gets overridden. Section 90 subsection 2 very clearly says that Income Tax Act or the treaty which is beneficial will apply, and therefore you will not apply the provisions of the domestic law, and then you will be non-resident only. And your income, certainly in income arising in India, which is taxable, will become taxable. We are not saying that. But the rate of tax on that will be applicable as per the treaty because you are a non-resident of India but resident of foreign country. There is no question of not ordinary resident. Sorry, there is no question of deemed residential status in this case will trigger because you become automatically non-resident and you are therefore the treaty will override the domestic law. Is it correct or not?
So Oswalji, you were right, but you have gone on to the other a different aspect. The aspect I was trying to explain first was
no, I got your. I extended the concept further.
Yes,
For paucity of time.
Yes. So the the second part is once we have decided whether he is a resident under the domestic law of India under section 6(1)(a) or otherwise, and if there is a tie-breaking situation that he is also a resident of UAE, because the UAE treaty, for example, says that if he has stayed for more than 183 days in UAE, then he is regarded as a resident for the purpose of application of treaty. It is stated in the treaty itself, a very uncommon situation in UAE, in Kuwait. The residence definition is different. Please look up some other treaties I'll tell you. For example, in Belgium and in case of Singapore, it is said that the residence is to be as per the domestic law of that country in both these cases. And in case of Hong Kong, it is explicitly, some criteria for residence are explicitly stated. So assuming that he is a resident of the other country under the domestic law of that country, then the tie-breaking situation would arise. And if a tie-breaking situation arises, then the criteria which you mentioned in that sequence, that whether he has a habitual abode, whether he has a permanent home, whether he has center of vital interests, and lastly, nationality, on those criteria, it will be decided of which country he is a resident of, and the treaty will operate in that manner, considering him resident of that particular country, in favor of which the tie-breaking rule has been resolved.
So therefore, now because of that, if a person becomes a resident of the other country, obviously Indian government has issued a clarification and circular saying that if you are a resident of foreign country, automatically you become non-resident in India. Is it correct?
No, here under the tie-breaking rule, we have conceded that he is a resident of that country for the purpose of treaty. And a treaty is an operation because he is a resident of one of the two countries. So he is entitled to the benefits of the treaty. So from that angle, he'll be able to avail of whatever benefits are there in the treaty. Like, for example, you were mentioning the withholding tax rates for interest, the withholding tax rate on royalties, or whatever benefits under the treaty are available will be available to him. So this consequence, Oswalji, you have mentioned very important consequence, which in the beginning when we were discussing the impact of this amendment, then we were saying that this is the limited impact of this amendment. But this is the major impact of this amendment, that if a person is regarded as a resident under section 6(1)(a), then in India, then he will be not getting the benefit of the withholding tax rates under the treaty, but he will be subjected to the domestic law tax rates.
The issue is, my limited question is, if he is a resident of foreign country, while filing his return in India, what return status he should submit? Should he say that I am a non-resident?
So, you see, he has to, we have a scheme of self-declaration or self-assessment. So the first call has to be taken by himself only. Maybe he can get an advance ruling, but otherwise the first call is to be taken by him. If I've understood your question, probably you're asking what he should do. If he is probably covered by 6(1)(a) and he's also a resident of the other country, then what he should do. So in that situation, firstly, he has to do the due diligence himself, and he has to decide for himself whether under the tiebreaker rule where he would fall. What would be the outcome of the tiebreaker rule as per his own reckoning, and afterwards he can file a return on that basis. And thereafter, obviously, if his view is not accepted to the department, then maybe there can be a change.
Suppose he has been given a TRC, tax residency certificate by the foreign country, based on his actual fact and assessment. They look into all the facts, his center of vital interest, he submit all the details, his club membership, his house, his wife, his children, all staying together, they are all abroad, and therefore he is given a tax residency certificate. He is a wiser person because he knows that he has to deal with India. And now, of course, anybody has to take the tax residency certificate everywhere if he has a cross-border transactions and cross-border income. And therefore, he gets a tax. Is it not a conclusive evidence that he is a resident? And apart from that fact, what you said, he has to make a self-assessment and then decide that he is, and on the basis of TRC and on the basis of the fact in his favor, he decides that I am a resident of foreign country. And then what will be my situation? I can't be resident of both the countries. If I am a resident of both the countries, then the tie breaking comes in. And based on the tie breaking, I have decided I am a resident. So what status I should have in India?
Oswalji, you referred to the TRC. Now, TRC is a statement of conclusive statement of residence in that country only. It's this has no conflict or no interference with the fact of him becoming a resident in India under Section 61A. So therefore, a situation of dual residence has arisen, and that will have to be resolved to decide which country he is a resident of. Advance ruling is the best mechanism to obtain in advance a finding on this. Otherwise, what we said that he has to proceed and decide on his own on the basis of the law which country he is resident of, and then that matter will be decided.
Can I obtain the advance ruling in the other country if it is available? Where is time process is very fast. Once you are saying that you obtain an advance ruling in India, it will therefore will apply in other country also. So why can't the advance ruling of the other country, which is a faster mechanism, here there is no guarantee after obtaining the advance ruling also it will not be challenged. It has to go invariably to the Supreme Court. So therefore, why not to go for an advance ruling of the other country?
No, Oswalji, because we are talking about the tax liability in India and not the tax liability in the other country. So the advance ruling in this case is the context of the advance ruling obtainment is Indian tax liability. So the advanced ruling in this case is an option, not an. I'm not recommending that you stray. I mean, I'm giving it as a way to decide.
No, I appreciate. I appreciate. I'm saying I totally understand and accept what you are explaining. But the time is essence of a matter. And here, advance ruling, all of you know very well, you can't criticize it, but at least we can put the statement of fact. We are not criticizing, but the statement of fact is you make an application, the law says it should be done within 6 months, never done in 2 years, 3 years, and thereafter the challenge in the High Court and the Supreme Court department does it, and even the taxpayer does it. And therefore, that is the reason I thought that a via media, because ultimately it's not a computation of income, it's a decision of the residential status, and I make all the explanation to the authority of the foreign country. And law of India says that, and law of the other country says that, my factual matrix I am giving, and then they decide. And thereafter also, if the India does not respect the advance ruling of the foreign country, which is more superior than our Indian advance ruling, therefore, then it will be a challenge for the taxpayer. Well, Siddharth.
At this point in time,
I'd like to say something on this.
Yes,
yeah.
please.
Okay, sir.
In fact, most of the people want to listen you rather than me.
So the only very short point I'll make on this, see, this dual residence has become such a controversy in advanced countries, the OECD countries, in respect of persons other than individuals, that they have decided that no criteria should be laid down in the treaty for deciding the dual residence cases, and it will have to be decided only between the competent authorities. And till the competent authorities decide the dual residence cases, there will be no treaty benefit available.
Correct.
So,
that is only for
I'm just mentioning. Just mentioning in passing.
Other than individuals, but individuals still they have not yet come up to this stage. I have not yet come across any country where the treaty says individuals also will not be decided. So, Siddharth, you want to say something?
Sir, in relation to this newly inserted clause 1A, there was a little bit different question. We are talking about treaties, we are talking about domestic law. So let's take an example where a person, we are talking about people based in UAE or Middle East. So the person is having a permanent residency in Middle East. He is deemed to be resident under clause 1A in India. Now in that case, when we talk about exchange of information or automatic exchange of information, where a person is required to make a declaration with respect to the tax residency in a particular country, and UAE under its own CRS regulation has clarified that the residency certificate will make that person as a tax resident of that country. Now such an individual who's deemed to be resident in India under Indian tax laws, and as per the CRS regulation in UAE qualifies to be a tax resident in UAE, what declaration will be made and where the exchange of information will happen to? Will it be that information with respect to that particular individual's global accounts will be done with UAE or India?
Very interesting question, Siddharth. And I may not be able to give you the full answer to this, but I'll definitely try. You see, firstly, let me tell the audience, which many of you would already be knowing, that at present, the automatic exchange of information or the CRS is confined to few streams of income only. It is not that it is in respect of all the income or items of income. It may be in respect of certain passive incomes such as interest, or what they call the financial institutions have to do a due diligence, and in every country which is participating in CRS, the financial institutions in those countries have to do a due diligence in respect of reportable accounts with them of non-residents and then send the information. Now the question would be, let us look at the change brought in due to section 6(1)(a) and what will be the impact of section 6(a) on AEOI under the present setup. Now the person in respect of which due diligence, which is done through self-declaration incidentally. Let me tell you that the financial institutions ask for a self-declaration from all the account holders, and the person concerned has to declare whether he is a non-resident or a resident. For example, when they are sending the information to India, they will want to know that who all are resident of India. Actually, they're following something called wider approach, that they ask persons that whether you are resident of any of other countries, and that information is collected, and if that country is a participant in CRS, the information is transmitted to that country. Now coming to our 6(1)(a). 6(1)(a) person is obviously a non-resident in India, a resident of India. So for due diligence purposes, as it appears, the person will be caught within the AEOI, and he will have to say that he will have to file that declaration. But I was thinking, because of the scope of taxation in India, that only his income which is derived from business or profession set up or controlled in India, from India, that income is taxable in India. So obviously India cannot tax the income arising from, let us say, UAE on bank deposits there, due to this person becoming a resident in India. His global tax liability is not there. So ultimately, this AEOI, even if as a procedure it may go on, it will not result into anything, any adverse result for that person. So this is what I was looking at it. And I was thinking of maybe getting it clarified further by talking to people who are dealing with AEOI. And in my view, probably, this is purely my personal view, maybe there is a case for thinking about not ordinarily persons, what should be the perspective in respect of them in AEOI is something that probably can be looked at.
But if you look at OECD guidelines on the subject, it says only the resident country information should be exchanged with the country of residence. So therefore, what Siddharth has explained seems to be correct, because if the TRC is obtained from that country and they say that you are a resident of this country, it is then that country and the address proof is there, he is staying there, and his address in the other country where from the exchange is coming is of that country only, then exchange of information will go to that country only, it will not come to India. Despite the fact that
Oswalji, see, we are concerned here with not only a case of TRC being issued by that country, we are also concerned with, naturally, if a TRC is given only by that country and there is no case of residence of India, there is no problem at all. That case is outside the purview of AUI. What we are worried about is the cases, or what we are concerned about is the cases where the person is also a resident of India under the domestic law of India. So in that situation, whether he will be covered by AUI is the issue we should try to find an answer to. And I gave you my answer that according to me, at present, he is a resident of India under the domestic law. So he is covered by AUI, but the impact in terms of those incomes, the utility of those incomes in the case of an NOR exchange through AUI, that doesn't seem to be there at the moment.
now the question is, in such a situation, we have narrated some of the treaties which have defined how the resident and for the treaty purposes will be calculated or considered under Article 4 of the treaty. Say, for example, India-Germany tax treaty, it talks about similar language like India-Russia, liable to tax therein by reasons of domicile, residence or management, etc. Similar criteria which we have introduced in the deemed residency criteria of our Income Tax Act under Section 6(1)(a), and the same criteria are there in number of treaties, including Germany. But these criteria do not match with the UAE, wherein 183 days presence, rightly explained by you, exist. And also in the case of Belgium, we have the treaty says if you are a resident of the contracting state, means a person who is under the law of the state is a resident of that country. It doesn't talk about by virtue of domicile, residence or place of management. And therefore, each treaty one has to understand and explain, understand and realize where you are resident. And then if it's a case of a dual residency, of course, rightly you are said that one has to take conscious call himself. And then once he filed a return, then he is subjected to scrutiny by the tax officer. You have to satisfy the tax officer. And if he does not accept your views, which is in all probability a case like in India, because where the potential disputes are bound to be there, and therefore the litigation will have to go on before the higher authorities. And well, Siddharth, you have any other next point? Next slide.
One example which is there when we are talking about, so there was a reference made to Section 6, subsection 5, whereby it was said that if for one source of income, the residency is determined, then it will apply to all sources of income. Now, what happens in a scenario where a person holds a residency card in UAE and is also a permanent resident holder or an employment pass holder in Singapore? Now, there are two treaty situations where we will factor in. And in UAE, as per your view that there is no tax there, so it will not fulfill the liable to tax condition. But in Singapore, the person is liable to tax therein. So once the person is in a position to take advantage of a particular treaty, then the person will be completely out of Section 1A.
Because he will not be a stateless person. He is filing his tax return in Singapore.
I agree. Yes, Siddharth, you're right. If he is this clause is only meant for those whose income is not taxable anywhere. Just let me confirm this once more, but I think it operates like that only, that any other country. It says any other country. So if he is liable to tax in Singapore, he is outside 1A.
So therefore, now, therefore, sir, if a person in India is not taxable, the other country should take a view he is not resident of India.
Please elaborate.
Give the treaty benefit. So a person in India is an agriculturist, his income is not taxable, though he is subjected to filing his tax return, etc. But will the other country should take a view that he is not liable to tax in India, and therefore the treaty benefit should be denied to him if he has a foreign income?
Oswalji, as we discussed before also, the majority of countries in the world regard exemption from tax to be covered under liability to tax if there is charge on that income. only in case where there is no tax in that country on any income, then only it's a case of being not liable to tax.
So what is the rationale in doing this? Because what treaties do is you sign the treaty with a country for allocating taxing rights between the countries, and Supreme Court in the case of Kulangan Chettiar has taken a view. Taxing right is assigned to a particular country. It means you have no business to interfere. It is sovereign right of that country to tax or not to tax, and hence the person is bound to be treated. Potential tax liability is equally relevant, and therefore it should be regarded as a resident of that country. And this is what Azadi Bachao as well as Kulangan Chettiar particularly talks about allocation of taxing right. If rights have been given to Malaysia, you cannot say that I will interfere with that, and they levy the tax or not is not our concern. So therefore, similar view I want to echo here. Liable to tax must be considered and construed to mean that a person is resident of that country has a right to tax, and he has all economic nexus, criteria, address, properties, family staying there. Then in that case, India has no reason to think that he is not liable to tax there. His taxing right is ultimately right of that sovereign right of that country. Whether they want to exercise that right or not is not our business to decide.
Oswalji, OECD commentary is otherwise. It is, if there is a comprehensive tax liability, then only it is considered to be a liability to tax. And now let me tell you something which is discussed. I found out from Abdul Razak case, that is the AAR decision. Something very interesting is written there, because you see, this question also arises at times that why do countries have treaties with other countries when there is no tax in those countries? So of course there is an economic reason also, but on the face of it, section 90 lays down the situations under which tax treaties are entered into, and therefore there is a requirement of perhaps tax liability, comprehensive taxation system in other country also. Now, I was reading the Abdul Razak case, and there it is said that at the time of negotiation of the original treaty, the stipulation was that there is going to be a comprehensive taxation in UAE within 3 months, and that did not happen. So even then, the treaty was intended to be with a view to have a case of elimination of double taxation, and the purpose was that. And later, as you know, when the problem arose because of the different conflicting decisions, then the government has chosen to renegotiate the treaty to straighten it out, and the liability to tax words are now no longer there in UAE treaty, and a person is regarded as a resident of UAE merely on the number of days of stay in UAE.
Yeah, Mayur, how much time you think we can go?
Yeah, I thought if there are some important questions from the chat participants, Siddharth can.
Siddharth, would you like to have some matters further to take up
from the participants? Any questions or any from presentation? Anything?
No, only thing is if a person becomes,
I think.
No, only last slide I would think it is relevant. If a person becomes a not ordinary resident in India, still there are some things which one should look into. He is still non-resident, and therefore explain the disclosure of foreign assets and foreign income, foreign assets in the return of income will not be relevant. It will not apply. Despite the fact he holds the foreign assets, he will not be subjected to Black Money Act for failure to report those assets which are abroad. And these are all still continuing unless the law is amended in India, the benefit still continues to remain. So therefore, and second thing is not ordinary resident status. Once granted under the domestic provisions, the income from business control or profession set up in India becomes taxable in India, even if it accrues or arises outside India. Now, question is control of business has to be distinguished from the substantial shareholding in a company. If you are shareholder of a company which is different entity and the control of a business set up in India, in my opinion, of course, we can ask Mr. Bansal, it should apply to proprietary concern or a partnership concern. So what is your view on that? This will be the last question from our side, and then we can ask the questions to the public at large.
So, Oswalji, I haven't given it much thought to this part, and which you are
We'll
just
leave it
now.
there.
Yeah, so we can move on to the questions which Siddharth has received.
Yeah, only last question is, if a person becomes not ordinary resident, the tax effect on his foreign income, which is, sorry, Indian income liable to tax will not be as per the treaty, it will be applicable as per the domestic law of India. And definitely
this is very important, and two more aspects which you mentioned would definitely are very good points, that under the Black Money Act or under the Foreign Assets Disclosure, because those apply to an ordinarily resident person only. So this amendment has no bearing on them.
Okay.
One of the interesting question which we have received is that in case of many foreign jurisdictions follow calendar year, whereas in India we follow financial year, and under the treaty there may be an overlap of 3 months period. So only for that period the income is taxable in that jurisdiction for the moment. Then still, for the purpose of section 6 1A, the person would be considered as stateless, because it is part of the year the income was taxable. For the other part of the year, the income is not taxable. What would be the view from a treaty point of view while applying section 6(1)(a)?
So Siddharth, if I understand you correctly, it's the income, let us say calendar year 2019, and for the January onwards, it is year 20. And the income in question was earned, I mean, I couldn't understand you. Can you come back on this?
So let's say a person is resident in a calendar year 2020 in USA. Let's take for the moment, assuming that citizenship criteria is not applicable, but the person is resident in USA for 20 financial year. Now we are testing this calendar year 20. Now we are testing this criteria for 2021 financial year in India, and for the part of the year that income was taxable in USA. Thereafter, it was not taxable in USA. So while considering the calendar year in USA, the income would have been taxable and the person would have been liable to tax on that income. Whether in such...
Siddharth, I can answer this question. You see, it's not only at a, we don't have to look at the taxation of a particular income for operating section 6(1)(a). What we have to look at is whether there is a liability to tax in USA under their domestic law in general. So even if the income, I mean, if there is a tax liability in USA, it won't be getting caught in section 6(1)(a). It will not fall within the purview of section 6(1)(a).
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I think it does.
Yeah, I think it answers the question of the participant who had put across. So I'm just a mode of communicating the question to you, sir. But I think that answers the question. One last point before we move to conclusion is that, sir, though FA may not be applicable to a person when he's a RNOR. However, there is a requirement to also file asset and liability schedule. There is one asset liability schedule which is applicable to a person whose income exceeds 50 lakh rupees in India. Now, in that scenario, would such person who's deemed to be resident in India and is a RNOR would be required to only file information with respect to Indian asset and liability, or it would be for the person's overall asset and liability? Because though FA schedule is specific, which is getting excluded, but here asset liability schedule will trigger.
No, Bansalji, let me add little spice into it. I am maintaining my accounts in respect of Indian assets and liabilities separately, and I am maintaining my assets and liabilities in respect of world assets and liabilities separately, which I am not disclosing to the tax authorities in India. So what should I do? What question Siddharth has asked you is now relevant.
So Siddharth, I think there is a clarification in board by way of a board circular in 2019 on this particular point, if I'm not mistaken. CBDT has clarified this probably, that isn't it?
Sir, not with respect to asset liability.
That was with respect to foreign assets.
Yeah.
Yes. So as far as FA schedule is concerned, that is not applicable to our NOR at all. But
Okay.
normal
Yeah.
asset liability schedule, which is one other schedule which overlaps with FA schedule in case you also have foreign assets. So there is no
Okay.
distinction made between the category of assets in an asset liability schedule.
And if my income is exceeding 50 lakhs.
So, what is your question on the asset and liability schedule?
So the question is that in case of a deemed resident who's deemed to be resident under section 61A, by virtue of section 66, he is regarded as a resident but not ordinary resident under the domestic law. Then while filing return of income, he will file status as resident but not ordinary resident.
Correct.
Then in that case, whether the asset liability schedule, which is to be filled up if the total income exceeds 50 lakh, will cover only Indian assets or will have to cover global assets of such individual. The information with respect to those assets and liabilities which are to be disclosed in Schedule AL.
Siddharth, I do not really know the answer to this, but I'm looking at it from the point of view of taxability of his income, because every disclosure is for the purpose of ensuring compliance in respect of discharge of tax liability in India. So therefore, foreign assets in case of NOR, I do not think there is significance of foreign assets in determining tax liability in respect of an NOR. So it doesn't appear to me that this would be required. And what the board clarification I was referring to in respect of foreign assets is also on similar lines. There also they have talked about the director fees or in respect of some company in which a person is holding interest abroad. Some such example is there. I'm not able to recall exactly, but logically it appears to me that this may not make sense, but I'm not sure about this.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I think we could have not, I will hand it over to Mayur Nayak, sir. We have already exceeded 15 minutes of the time.
So first of all, I must thank Mr. Bansal having candidly agreed to come on this webinar and answer all the questions to the best of your ability, and we got the best of the answers from you. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks to the both the speakers, friends. We will have to request Mr. Bansal to put our points of view to the government, especially on 3 to 4 important aspects. One is that the period of lockdown should be excluded in determination of the residential status, giving much relief as even recommended by OECD. Secondly, about the exchange of information, if the government can come out with the guidelines on that, that would be a useful information. We have discussed about computing 15 lakhs, under a treaty situation, under the exam, whether what does total income, mean. All clarifications would be, very much advisable. Then assets and liability schedule, the last point which we discussed, of course, that also needs to be clarified, and some relief should be given. And if the disclosure is restricted to only Indian assets, that would be a great relief. Friends, we have a
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
Mayur, I think we
lost Mayur, right? Yeah, we lost
connectivity.
So I thank on behalf of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society to every viewer of this program, and also thank Mr. Rajat Bansal for sharing his views very candidly, and with Bombay Chartered Accountants Society is deeply obliged for your views. Thank you very much, sir.
And thank you to you also, Oswal, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Both of you for spending time with us. And the presentation will be uploaded on the BCS website, and the recording will also be made available on YouTube channel. Thank you for participating. Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you.
I also thank everyone for this great opportunity of participating in this knowledge dissemination. And these seminars do put across various issues which otherwise maybe in government or even in, I'm sure that the professionals are discussing these issues much more than us, but it gives us the other side view also, and definitely I'll see whatever best I can do with the suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We can't shake hand any